What is going on, people? It's Matt from Liquid Loans, and in this one, me and CC, the CEO of Liquid Loans, are joined by Nick Fett and Brenda Loya from Tellor, a decentralized Oracle protocol that is partnering with Liquid Loans, so we can find out more about them and the protocol in general. So with no further ado, let's go. Hey Nick and Brenda, on behalf of me, CC, and the whole of the team, welcome to the Liquid Loans channel, and thanks for taking the time to jump on with us today.
Yeah, no, thanks for having us.
It's great to see you guys. Listen, it's no secret that Liquid Loans is partnering with Tellor, and we're staying true to our word to be a truly decentralized protocol on PulseChain. But before we get into that, it'd be great to find out a bit more about you guys. So maybe we can start with you first, Brenda, about your background in the space and how you became the CEO of Tellor.
So my background is actually in economics, and I guess I joined this crazy industry basically because I honestly I was at first just looking to invest, and I was just gonna buy something. I'm a long-term investor, and I was just gonna buy something and let it be. And I was doing my research, and I was pretty much researching Ethereum and Bitcoin. And like months before, I had seen that Nick had started a crypto company. And then I reached out to him to ask him, like, I really like this Ethereum. It seems like it provides some service. I just see more value on it. And then we just got together. We talked about that. And I remember thinking, like, whatever he's doing, like, I'll just try and support him, like, get something. And when I talked to him, he said, like, no. Instead, if I raise, why don't you join me? And then at that moment, I was just like, sure, maybe. And then a month later, he calls me. He's like, hey, I raised. You want to leave your job, your 13-year career as an economist, and join me? And 3 days later, I said, sure. And yeah, it's crazy. I honestly do believe in the technology and the change that it could bring. And it's just exciting to be part of something so new and so cutting edge. And as an economist, it's just super interesting. So I joined him, and we were actually doing financial derivatives. And for me, it was super interesting. But then we run into the Oracle problem, and that's how we ended up starting Tellor. And at the beginning, actually, the last startup, Nick was the CEO. And this startup, it was my turn, but I think he just didn't want to do any of the paperwork. I ended up being the CEO.
I know that feeling, Brenda.
And then just blaming me for being the one saying no and, being the mean one. So I'm the bad cop now. So that's how we do it.
Awesome story. Well, I was going to ask Nick actually how he ended up becoming the CTO, but I guess we found out now already, right?
Well, that's Brenda's perspective.
Sorry.
Nick, what's your background in crypto, and how did you end up leading the tech charge as the CTO of Tellor then?
Sure. No, so I've been in crypto a bit longer. I was, kind of into Bitcoin early on. I was doing like bot trading on Bitcoin. For quite a while, and then I got a job at the CFTC, so a regulator here in the US. And part of my job there was doing crypto regulation. So I got to look in. This was 2015, 2016 timeframe. So, and then, a lot of people were trying to do derivatives on crypto and stuff like that. It was back then, it was all about blockchain, not Bitcoin, if you remember. And it was, I sort of disagreed. So I left, and I said, we can actually do financial products in a completely decentralized way. And that's whenever in 2017, I left and started a derivatives company. So we were building derivatives on Ethereum. And then you obviously heard how I brought Brenda on. And then, basically the problem with a derivative is that, you're betting on the price of something. So like if you have a futures contract, you're betting on the price of Bitcoin. How do you know what the price of Bitcoin is? So smart contracts on any of these, they can't read off-chain data. And this is what's known as the Oracle problem. So how can you get that information in? Now we could trust Matt and say, Matt, why don't you just put it in? But the problem obviously is that now if you die or if you're malicious, you determine who wins the bet. So there were really no options for getting around this back in 2017. So we said, listen, why don't we try and take this on? And that was sort of the start of what Tellor was. So we came up with a really cool idea, and we're like, hey, we like this idea way better than the derivatives piece. And so we sort of did a pivot, and yeah, then we just have been oracles all the way since.
Nice, and the rest is history. So
Yeah.
for the viewers who are just hearing about you guys, what exactly is Tellor and how does it work?
Yeah, so I think Tellor, as you could probably guess from that last little statement, it's an oracle. So these are called blockchain oracles, and these are basically decentralized networks, or simply, Matt in my story was acting as the oracle. It's something that places data into a smart contract. So if you have a smart contract and you say want to know what the price of Bitcoin is, even if you want to know about another chain, so if you want to know, hey, did some money get sent to me on Polygon? Did Bitcoin get sent to a certain address? Your smart contract on PulseChain or on Ethereum can't listen to APIs. It can't read other chains. So the way that Tellor works to actually decentralize the process, people come to our smart contract and they place a bond. So you'll take around 100 of our tokens and you lock it into the smart contract. This is now you're staked. Now, whoever needs the data, so let's say CC here, he needs the Bitcoin price into a smart contract. He would come and say, hey, I'll pay $5 to whoever gives me the Bitcoin price. All of these people who have money staked can then, their software will race to go grab the Bitcoin price from an API and put it on chain for him for that $5. Everybody now sees that, oh, the price of Bitcoin is on chain. They can then look at it. They can say, hey, is that actually the price of Bitcoin? If it is the price of Bitcoin, it just stays on and CC can use it. If it's not, what happens is very quickly people dispute it. So Matt, you would say, hey, that's actually not the price of Bitcoin. You pay a small fee to dispute the data. The data gets taken off chain and it goes to a 2-day long vote. So the token holders in our community get to vote then on, was this correct information? If it was correct information, Matt, you just lost your dispute fee. If it was not, and he was actually lying, whoever the reporter was, he gets slashed, you get his fee. That's basically how Tellor works in a nutshell. You request data, you can request any kind of data, and people put it on chain for you at the risk of getting slashed, but for a reward.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So CC, why does Liquid Loans, why do we need Tellor on PulseChain then?
I think it's following on that, and I did want to point out something, that there is another founder of Tellor that's not here today, and that's Michael. So just wanted to acknowledge Michael, because he certainly has helped at the outset, just in a couple of the conversations that we've had. I think just to come back to that question, why Tellor for us? I think there's a view that would say, look, you probably could get away with a price feed directly from, say, something like a decentralized exchange. But the challenge for us in that space is that if you go down that path, it creates other risks, right? So it's not unlike the risk of, hey, we're just going to ask Matt for the price. Sure, we're going to a decentralized exchange, but the reality is that can be manipulated, right? So people can act in a nefarious way, and the API that you're running there could be from a liquidity pool that perhaps is a little bit thin, and someone decides to play games with the price. And if that's the only price feed you have, it's a significant challenge in terms of how do you manage that? How do you reduce the risk of manipulation, or the risk that could come from some nefarious act that actually has an impact on price? There's a couple of things for us around Tellor. I mean, obviously, we'd heard of Tellor when we were looking at Liquidity, which is obviously what we forked to bring onto PulseChain. But at the time, we thought, okay, well, Liquidity was also using Chainlink. We weren't that enamored with the approach that was being taken by Chainlink at the time, particularly around, it felt like bad actors weren't really penalized. And we thought, I'm not sure that that's the ideal way. And then we looked into Tellor a little bit more and realized, hey, this is a much better, more decentralized. It actually does slash people if they provide the wrong price feed. The mechanics here seem to be a lot better, a lot more aligned with what we had hoped for. And it was a process of reaching out, and we're really glad that we have. And I think we're very happy with the professionalism that not just Nick and Brenda and Michael, but the team. So there's a team that sits behind these guys, and they've been very helpful for us. And I think you probably know, Matt, that we're now running a version of Tellor on PulseChain. We've also spun up the node software. So Telliot is the application to help us spin up some nodes. the plan for us in that space is to actually make that as easy as possible, and provide a mechanism for people to spin up nodes really simply. And the reason we want to do that is ultimately what gives you longevity and what gives you sustainability in this space, I think, is to have a number of reporters providing price feeds to the Oracle. And if we do that, and if we can expand that network of reporters on PulseChain, it provides a much better outcome for us in the long term. So we'll do everything we can to make sure that our community, or the PulseChain community, there's a number of reporters that are quite happy to obviously be incentivized to provide the feed, but at the same time provide us with some sustainability. And we're very happy and really pleased that we've managed to form this relationship with the Tellor guys. So thank you, guys.
Awesome. So Nick, going back to your story, when you were giving your background story, obviously you were more attracted to the DeFi ecosystem than you were to doing derivatives, right? What does a truly decentralized ecosystem look like to you?
Well, I mean, it was like back whenever I came on, there wasn't really much of a DeFi ecosystem. It was, like in 2017, it was like all you could do was like, there was like Augur, if you remember, it just came out, which was a prediction market. So you could do some basic, betting on events and things like that. But I mean, decentralization, it's such a challenge to sort of stay decentralized because there's sort of base decentralization. Like, are you theoretically decentralized? Like, you don't have like, two nodes that can control everything and shut everything off. Like, okay, cool, you're theoretically decentralized, but after that, it becomes more of a challenge. Like, making sure as an ecosystem, like, you don't just you have a lot of participants, you have geographically distributed participants, you have a lot of validators. Even as Tellor, like, we have reporters, we have people who can dispute, but you have to make sure that there's a lot of them and that they're incentivized. If you just have a few, it's, even though theoretically anybody can come on, you actually want a whole lot of people on there. So it's just it's one of these things that you just have to constantly push back, kind of against any sort of forces of centralization. And I think you've seen that in a lot of other ecosystems where we're starting to realize. I'm sure most of you guys know, you saw the Tornado Cash actions recently, and then like the code gets taken down off GitHub, their Discord gets taken down. Like, it's like, oh man, like, we aren't really that decentralized because now we can't communicate or share code. And so it's like there's a lot of these edge cases that you have to deal with. And same with like all the node providers who would stop servicing it. Do you actually have decentralized node providers and people running their own nodes? Well, you'll find out. So it's something you just got to constantly push for. And as long as the ethos are right, it's just a challenge you got to keep up with.
Yeah. I had a question around that because I think I must admit yesterday created a few little heartaches for me, and there was some announcements made around the regulators looking at algorithmic stablecoins. And I think that was an interesting announcement, but I think what they're trying to avoid there is the whole nexus between having the stable coin, but also having the collateral. So if you're the owner or the developer of both, I think there needs to be some separation. And the example with that's occurred recently with Luna, I think, was what motivated that. But it was interesting that you mentioned that you'd worked with the regulator. Were there any surprises for you guys when you came out and sort of started and rolled out the initial version of Tellor?
No, I mean, the regulators are relatively quiet. Like, I'm sure you see recent actions. Like, they just went after Anne Bellina, who was 4 or 5 years old now. It's like the case, theoretically, like, Teller's time is still in the future for talking to regulators. It's like they just
2023.
Yeah, they take forever to do things. So, they're just on a different time frame than we are. But, I think what a lot of people need to realize is that as someone who's sort of followed the regulatory space for a long time here, it changes so much. And they, back whenever we were launching Tellor, like, it was like, they're like, it was still the problem with the SEC, but they're like, listen, as long as you say you're a utility token, you're good to go. Just make sure that you're a utility token and you don't do what's called an ICO. Don't call it an ICO. You're good to go. And like that's clearly wrong now. But like people, like lawyers, there were always problems, and then you had other lawyers who were super cautious who did the other problem. So I've seen it go the other way where people were too cautious. The one great example I like to give was Ledger X, if you remember them at all. So they were a futures exchange, and they wanted to be a regulated futures exchange, and they went in 2000, I think it was like 2013, to try and become a registered futures exchange. They had to raise like $1 billion to get backing for this thing and capital. It was 2017 when they finally launched. So it took 4 years. And right whenever they launched, CME and all the other big futures exchange launched as well. So they like lost their complete, market advantage. And at the same time, BitMEX was the derivatives exchange for those years. And BitMEX did what, how many billions of dollars did those guys get? So like they would have like beat BitMEX to market if you would have just ignored the regulators. And it's one of those things that like you see it all the time, like regulators who have told people like, oh, go in and register with the SEC or something like that. Well, it would take you years and you'd miss the market cycle. So just you almost have to push the envelope because they haven't really given you an option, which is sad.
Yeah, it is. Sorry, mate, didn't mean to interrupt you there.
No, not at all, not at all. If we go back to, I think, CC, you've mentioned it, Nick, you've mentioned it, but maybe Brenda, you can answer this about reporters. How can people be a reporter and how can they make money doing that?
So they have to put up a bond to actually become a reporter, because that way if they misbehave, they can actually be penalized. They make money basically based on tips from the users. So it's sort of like a chicken and egg thing, because, it's like they make more money as there are more users, but for us to have more users, there's got to be more adoption. And it's hard to get there at the beginning. But that's how they would make money. The only other network, generally Tellor, the only network where there are inflationary rewards is Ethereum. So all of the other networks is generally we either bridge the token or we find a separate way of fueling the system. But that's basically how they make money. The software, it's now, or with the upgrade to, actually now even, it's basically proof of stake, because you just have to stake to provide data. You do have to run software, but it's not like, like you're running proof of work software that is going to be super, hard to do, or that's going to require a lot of hash power. So it's fairly cheap to do it. It's just there's got to be the incentive there from the other side, from the customer.
Awesome. So anyone can be a reporter. You don't need loads of mining, like you said. You don't need loads of mining equipment and lots of experience.
No, we provide our own software that they can use basically out of just download it from GitHub, and that's all the instructions for you to be able to do it. You can also run a monitor, which the monitor allows you to just look at prices that were submitted that they look really off, and then you can actually go and pay and dispute it, and hopefully you get the stake. That's another way that users or participants can make money. But yes, it's all software that we provide. There are some people that have very specialized software because it is competitive. So some people are very good coders, and they take whatever we put out and make it better the next day, and just,
Who are those guys? Because we can imagine there must be a mad rush to get to them. And there must be some interesting innovation happening in the back end to achieve those outcomes. Have you guys learnt much from that process?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak on the technical side. It's been, so we actually, it's super crazy how fast like optimizations happen. So like with Tellor, like we actually started off proof of work. So you could, you would have to submit with it, some proof of work similar. We had our own custom hashing algorithm, and then you could submit it. Like whenever we launched in 2019, like I had a little Python miner that I wrote on a CPU, and then like a month later, people were starting to write like GPU miners, and like so I wrote a GPU miner and open sourced it for everyone. And then like a month later, it was like FPGA miners that you could buy for $10,000 from China. And then a month later, it was nothing but FPGA pools. And we're like, man, this was like so fast. And then same with staking, once once we release a piece of software, now it's like so many MEV bots. So these are people who are just front running transactions. So they'll see you trying to submit a transaction, to submit a price, and they'll jump right in front of you and to take that reward for, you know, and it's just one of these things that it gets so competitive so fast for these guys. But, you know, it's been great as far as from the tech side, because we get to learn how to build MEV bots and monitor for these things. And it's definitely a lot of fun. But yeah, if you think like in your system, you're like, oh, well, there's a way for somebody to game it slightly, you know, but they probably won't do that for a while. It's like, no, it's going to happen in like 10 minutes from somebody on the other side of the world.
I'd imagine, Nick, there must be some real characters in that reporter group that, you know, it's like, holy cow.
Yeah, they're good guys. Or girls. We don't know really who they are.
Galaxy brains somewhere in the globe.
Yeah, but it's interesting, you know, for a while, like, you know, early on we had like a bunch of Russian miners, and then whenever it was in that pool phase, it was like we had a bunch of Chinese mining pools, and now it's like more geographically distributed, I would say. But yeah, it's definitely fun people.
They keep us on our toes for sure.
I bet they do. I bet they do. We've got a few of those in the PulseChain community. Let me tell you.
Just a few.
Yeah.
So CC, I know we touched on obviously Tellor's being on the testnet now with liquid loans, but what does the next steps on the roadmap look like from here for Tellor and integration with PulseChain and liquid loans?
Look, obviously the guys over at Tellor have helped enormously to get us up and running. As you know, Matt, we've got a team that's working on Telliot, the reporter, and there's actually some stuff that we're doing that we're kind of hoping that we can make it really super easy for folk in PulseChain to spin them up. So the idea being that at the moment, our testnet version of the DApp is calling on a price feed from PulseX. We want to expand that now to start calling price feeds from Tellor. There's a bit of work to do in that space to make sure that that's all going to come together nicely. And again, the reason being is that we do want a more decentralized model. And whilst our expectation is that we'll have PulseX in that mix, so we'll definitely maintain PulseX as an API or a feed into the price feed contract. Our expectation is that we really want the community behind this. So next steps for us is, and Matt, you're a part of it, we need to educate the community in terms of what the hell is a reporter? How the hell do I spin up a node? And if I'm not technical, can I still participate? And are there some things that we may be able to help the community sort of learn a little bit more about that? Brenda and Nick, our PulseChain at the moment has a lot of validators and people that have spun up effectively nodes to provide support to PulseChain. Our anticipation that we'll approach that audience as well. So hopefully we'll have a significant number of reporters providing price feeds for us, and obviously we'll look to integrate that. There is some additional work that we'd like to do, and we'll have a chat about that afterwards, and that is effectively to try and figure out all the various attack vectors that we may need to consider. And you guys have been through the mill with all of this stuff, and I think it's a real challenge. There's always someone prepared to test the edge case, right? So you have to make sure that you've got that covered. So part of our process is obviously we'd like to engage with you guys and your team just to nut that out a little bit further. But the roadmap for us is very much about get our community on board, get them educated, see if we can get some of them to spin up some nodes, and I think we'll start providing feeds that way.
Gotcha. Well, listen, guys, I know we've barely scratched the surface, but it's good to find out a bit about you guys and about the protocol. Thanks a lot for coming on, and I do appreciate your time.
Thanks, Brenda. Thanks, Nick. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
So I hope you enjoyed that video with the folks from Tellor. If you like content like this, do hit that subscribe button and that bell icon so you're notified every time we drop new videos on the channel. You can also tap the like button, share the video with someone who you think it may benefit, and if you're feeling very kind, consider dropping a cheeky comment below for the algo. It does help us out. Thanks for watching, and I will see you on the next one.